For the first time in 10 days, we start a stage that's less than 100 miles, 90 to be precise, with the level of difficulties as high as any one of the last 2 weeks. Slow pace today with a lot of wind in the faces of Miguel Indurain, Benesto and company. They can afford to slow down. This has been the fastest paced tour in history. Two very difficult climbs in the first 50 miles, both category 1s, both taller than L'Alpe d'Huez, as a matter of fact. Then the 18.5-mile hike to the top of Val Thorens, 7,400 feet to the peak. The first real challenge of the day, the first of 2 time bonus sprints. Phil Liggett and Paul Sherburne are standing by. Phil has an update on that first sprint.
And the opening sprint of the day, and a clear win for Thierry Gouvenet of Gann. So the Gann team are getting a little bit of reward there, because they're down to 4 riders left in that team now. But it just shows you, Paul, how steadily they are riding out of town today. And on the Col Du Glandon here, nobody anxious at all to take up the pace. But the camera's gone to the back of the field, Paul, and there's a crash. But can you believe this? It's Pantani who's gone down, and Alberto Elli's gone with him.
Well, this is the man I was expecting a lot of today, and he doesn't look as if he's in very good shape there at all. He's probably a little bit surprised at falling off. That can happen. This is a dangerous part of the descent here. They descend halfway up the Col Du Glandon before they actually go up, and Pantani looks to me as if he's in a very bad way at the moment.
Well, his whole team is around him, and Pantani certainly looking distressed. He has, in fact, an injury to his left knee there, and a nasty fall in amongst the rocks on the left of the road. It's, as Paul said, just a little small descent here before the kick starts up the climb itself. And the team are all around him. He pulls his bike out of the wreckage.
That, in fact, is Alberto Elli, is the rider that he went down with there, and it's a shame to see that happening, because Elli is also a good rider for the mountains later on in the day, and he's not very happy at all, and I think he's actually not sure exactly where he is. He came down there, and it was a little bit of a surprise to him.
Well, the rider who's staying with him is Mario Mantovan at number 55, and in fact all the team luckily were around him, and now we're beginning to make some headway with the team around him here through the team cars. But although we're in the team cars, in fact we're a good minute behind the actual peloton, who are still climbing, hopefully, or thankfully indeed, very slowly, because hopefully he will get back. And the riders with him here, and here he is. And Pantani, you know, is still in a great deal of pain here, because this is a man we've seen climb like an angel this tour, and if he hadn't been hurt, he would have flown back to that field.
It is such a shame to see this, because this man, I felt, would have been in second place overall by tonight, because of the way he's been riding so far in the Tour de France this year. In the mountains, every time it went uphill, he was flying up them, but he really can't get back into any rhythm. He must be very, very pained at the moment. It's that knee, it looks very bad to me, and it may well be that he took a little bit of a bang on the head as well, and he just can't get into his rhythm, because further up the mountain, the main field aren't really attacking this col at the moment, because all the riders today absolutely scared by this stage. 3 huge cols to climb in just a distance of 90 miles.
A col in the French Alps is the top, or the summit. Now, we didn't actually see Marco Pantani go down in that crash, but we got an idea the other day coming down Ventoux about how dangerous these downhills can be. Look at Pantani. He actually puts his stomach and chest on the saddle, trying to be as aerodynamic as possible. Very easy to fall off the back if he hits a bump. Can happen to the best of them, including Miguel Indurain, perhaps the best. Coming down the same hill at 70 miles per hour, hanging it all out, and then hauling it back in. That's literally living life on the edge. Let's get back on course now with Phil and Paul.
Well, we're inside 1 kilometre to the summit now. It has been a long, tortuous climb for this rider, Pantani. He's been on the back of the field once or twice, but immediately there's any small acceleration, and we really haven't had any significant acceleration in the climb, then he's at the back again. He's been continually talking with his team manager, with the race doctor, and things are not looking good for him at all right now, Paul.
Well, it's very sad, because he climbed up into 5th place in the overall standings yesterday, and I thought he was going to climb up even higher today, because he was just over 2 minutes and 19 seconds behind second place Richard Virenque, and I thought today was going to be the big day for him, because this is one of the toughest stages of the Tour de France so far, with 3 huge mountains to climb, and then the final ascent up here to Val Thorens. But he really is in a bad way at the moment. It's hard to know whether it really is actually physical or more psychological, the fact that he was shocked by the fact that he crashed.
Well, this is how the riders in the Tour de France can tame the high mountains, when they decide not to race, and the big field are having the best possible rest they can on this first mountain of the day. They've made no serious effort at all. We're now on the left of our picture, just about 500 meters from the summit of the climb. And we can expect to see the polka dot jersey here, just behind Torres of Richard Virenque, who might well go out and win the sprint. He needs the points, but of course the man nearest to him is Marco Pantani. And Pantani will not be taking part in the sprint for the King of the Mountains points today.
We can only hope that the long descent down here as they go down to the bottom of the Col Du Madeleine will give Marco Pantani a little bit of time to recover and get back into the race mentally, and hopefully that the damage he did on that crash there wasn't too much, because a day without Marco Pantani in the mountains for me is going to be a very sad one, because he's been such a dynamiter of this race so far.
Miguel Indurain never far from the action, just watching Richard Virenque, so the second and first placed overall in the race. Of course, Virenque's main objective now, apart from his high finish in Paris, is a place on the podium wearing that polka dot jersey as King of the Mountains leader. This is the situation at the back of the race, and immediately the acceleration comes at the front, and then I'm afraid Pantani loses ground at the back. It looks as though Richard Virenque, and this is Richard Virenque going now for the summit. A good clean sprint by him, and he's going to take the points at the top. He's being chased by Mario de Klerk here, Peter de Klerk rather. I'm not surprised de Klerk ever thought he would compete for points on a first category climb and get second place, but there we are. Over the top is Virenque, de Klerk, and Pelliccioli was third.
Well, as you can see, the main field is basically all together today. I think there's been somewhat of a truce in the field, because the riders here know that if they race directly from the start on a stage like this, then most of the teams would lose half of the riders that they've got left in the race, and all the leaders of the Tour de France need their teams to stay with them.
We're looking at Team Carrera doing the best they can to get Marco Pantani after the crash over the top of Col Du Glandon, trying to become the comeback kid of the '94 Tour de France.
The long descents, and now the attacks have started on the climb of the Col de la Madeleine. In fact, they started about halfway up when Bjarne Riis, Peter Ugrumov, the 2G Risk team riders, and Nelson Rodriguez of the ZG team, they went clear. But now we're watching the scrap here as the other riders try to join them. Indurain now also being forced out of the group. Pantani, despite his injury, has attacked, and in fact he's countered an attack made by his teammate Vladimir Pulnikov. The rivalry continuing among the two Carrera riders. This is Richard Virenque, who's going with Pantani again, his rival, his serious rival for the King of the Mountains competition. This race now, Paul, has come alive.
And really a serious rival for second place in the overall standings at the moment as well, because this morning he was just 2 minutes and 19 seconds behind Richard Virenque. He's got a little bit of a problem with his bicycle there, and let's not forget that this is a changed bicycle because he destroyed his first one in that crash on the descent of the Col de la Madeleine. But it's really great to see that he's recovered and got back into the race, because he's really putting the race on fire.
So Pantani then at the moment is chasing Vladimir Pulnikov. Ahead of Pulnikov is Jim van der Leer, one of the few Belgians who really can climb. And then about 1 minute and 40 seconds ahead of Pantani are the three leaders, and it's Peter Ugrumov, Bjarne Riis and Rodriguez. They've been climbing all of the climb in that order, all of the work being done by Ugrumov, who is lying overall in 9th position. Roberto Conti, the hero of yesterday on Alpe d'Huez, now pacing Miguel Indurain, Alex Zula. And then we've got also in this group, I think Luc Leblanc is just about hanging on. The big man who's been lost out, though, Paul, is Armand de las Cuevas, over 2 3/4 minutes back now.
He's a long way back. He looked as if he was suffering as soon as the race began the climb here. And in fact, Thomas Davy dropped back initially to try and help him, but now Davy's been lost from the yellow jersey group, and you can see now that Roberto Conti, a little bit further down the line, is putting the pressure on to try and get up to these riders, and Richard Virenque knows that he has to stay with Marco Pantani. But it's so great to see Pantani recovered from that crash, because at one moment I thought he was in such a bad way that he was actually going to have to retire.
Well, this is Jim van der Leer, and he's been joined now by Richard Virenque and Marco Pantani, rather. And this group is now fighting out the Tour de France again on the high mountains. They're splitting up. There was a bunch of around 30 climbing quite happily until, first of all, Vladimir Pulnikov shot forward and was quickly pursued by Marco Pantani. It does seem as though Pantani has recovered from that knee injury, and he was a lucky man that the race had chosen to potter along for the first couple of hours today. We're now looking here at Miguel Indurain on the climb of the Col Du Madeleine. 1 minute 40. He is behind now the riders who attacked midway up, Bjorn Ries, Ugrimov and Nelson Rodriguez.
And it looks now as if Miguel Indurain has decided is enough on the slopes of the climb here, because he's put the pressure on, and that pressure has got rid of Luc Leblanc, who was lying in 3rd place overall this morning. Armand de las Cuevas is a long way further down the mountain as well, and Indurain just with a slight acceleration came straight up to Pantani. What an incredible man.
He seems to be able to do exactly what he wants to do. We're sorry about the picture breakup today on the mountain, the Col Du Madeleine. The atmospherics here are pretty bad to bring pictures up to our helicopter. Low cloud in most of the area around the Alps today, but I hope you'll accept that it is very difficult to do this, and that we're showing you pictures now as we're coming up towards the final kilometre on the top of the Col Du Madeleine, and they've still got the long climb up to the finishing line today at Val Thorens.
Indurain chasing a group of 3 riders, including Bjorn Ries, who won stage 13 the other day. Pantani, 2 riders ahead of Indurain, trying to move into 2nd place overall. Marco Pantani, Richard Virenque and Miguel Indurain are the first 3 riders you see coming up to the summit. Then one more mountain, Val Thorens, still in the distance.
1 kilometre to go, so the gap is coming down now.
Yes, and it's still Marco Pantani who's setting the pace at the front, and he's really going to leap up the overall standings tonight if he can keep up on the next climb when we come up to Val Thorens here, because the man who was 3rd and 4th overall at the start of the day, Luc Leblanc 3rd and Armand de las Cuevas in 4th place, have been dropped by the yellow jersey group, and if they can't get back on the descent, stand to lose an awful lot of time by tonight.
And the man they want today is the man at the front of these 3 leaders on the top as we come towards the top of the Col Du Madeleine. It is Peter Ugrimov, because he lies 9th overall. He's 14 minutes plus off the lead of Indurain, but of course Pantani would like to make sure he doesn't open too much of a gap on him and catch him up in the overall classification. Bjorn Ries in 2nd place has struggled all the way up, yet he's managed to sit in there in 2nd place. And Rodriguez, he's really been along for the ride. He's done nothing whatsoever. He has just sat there and let the other 2, because he knows the other 2 want to open the gap over that chase group, and he's taking full advantage of it.
Well, Ries is really going to regret the 15 minutes he lost on the stage. We went over the Mont Ventoux, because at that time he was lying in 7th place overall. Now he's some 25 minutes behind Miguel Indurain, and that 15 minutes would have put him as a serious contender today. But Ugrimov doing all the work. He's going to try and get over the top with his teammate Bjorn Ries, and then the 2 of them can work together to try and keep that deficit ahead of Miguel Indurain on the descent.
So the top of the Col Du Madeleine, nobody is going to challenge Peter Ugrimov, who's led all of the way up it since the attack was launched, followed over the top by his Danish teammate Bjorn Ries, who now zips up ready for the plunge to the valley below. If the newspapers are offered, I'm sure they'll take them. And in 3rd place, Nelson Rodriguez. Those are the 3 men over the top of the Col Du Madeleine. This is the battle now for the next men over. And Marco Pantani, you can still see on his knee there the bloodstain of the crash on the descent before they made the climb of the Col Du Glandon. But he seems to be settling back in again now. These really are the cream. Pantani, Virenque 2nd overall, Miguel Indurain here, who is the leader of course, and Alex Zula trying to climb away from the 10th place he currently occupies, because he really was expected to be a top 4 finish in Paris, and taking the points again away from Pantani and making that polka dot jersey look realistically his now is Richard Virenque. He pulls away and snatches 4th place at the top, and behind him 5th for Pantani. And that we would never have thought a few miles ago when he had that crash and looked to be going out of the Tour.
Well, it's fantastic to see that he has recovered, but a little bit further down it looks as if Luc Leblanc has recovered somewhat as well as we come up to the top. It's going to be Pantani, it's going to be Richard Virenque. In fact, Miguel Indurain decided, look boys, don't forget I'm the strong man here, so he went over ahead of Richard Virenque, but a little bit further back it looks as if Luc Leblanc has recovered, and he should reintegrate with the yellow jersey group on the descent.
So Indurain heads off down from the top of the Col Du Madeleine. I'm sure he does it just to make sure they understand who really is the boss. He had no reason there to try to outsprint Richard Virenque. So the leaders are over and they're on the way down. Some stars are now losing their overall places in the Tour de France today. They've lost over 3 minutes on the way up. We'll take a break.
Mountain on the Tour. 76 miles into the race, the breakaway group of 3 has a 5-minute advantage over the yellow jersey crowd of Miguel Indurain.
And this breakaway of 3 are still clear by a long way and still gaining ground over the yellow jersey group. Bjorn Ries, Peter Ugrimov and Nelson Rodriguez. Virtually the same order as it has been ever since they climbed the Col Du Madeleine. They've never altered position. Always Ugrimov setting the pace, Ries in the middle, and little Nelson Rodriguez there sitting at the back. The last time check we got, it was 5 minutes and 10 seconds lead over the group here of around 26 riders, with Miguel Indurain riding third man behind Pascal Lino and Vladimir Pulnikov.
Well, it's now up to these two teams to start chasing a little bit. Indurain is not under any threat at all, but Richard Virenque and Luc Leblanc are in a threat of losing their second and third place overall, as are the Carrera riders of losing their fifth place overall of Marco Pantani, which is now their responsibility to do a little bit of work in this group.
So Lino has done a fine piece of pacemaking here, because he would now like to see his Festina team brought a little bit back into this race today, with their men, Luc Leblanc and Richard Virenque, lying second and third overall. And the fact that Armand de las Cuevas, the last we heard, was some 6 3/4 minutes behind this group, and so is going well away from the leaderboard tonight, unless he has a miraculous recovery on this long climb up to Val Thorens. Pulnikov launches yet another attack, and I wonder if Pantani, his teammate, will try to counter the move yet again.
Well, Pulnikov has been very active along the first few kilometres of this climb here. He's tried once or twice to get clear, but I think it's a little bit the fact that everybody's worried about that breakaway in front with Piotr Ugrimov and Barney Ries going clear. You see Pulnikov try, but he really doesn't have the power to get clear, and Indurain just accelerates a little bit to bring the little Russian rider back into the fold. Alex Zula comes to the front now, setting a little bit of a tempo, but further up the slope, his teammate Eric Brooking has tried to break clear, but in fact Brooking is only at the moment about 25 to 30 seconds ahead of this group. Now we get a chance to have a look at Brooking, who's been followed by Bo Hamburger and Munoz Fernandez, the Colombian champion. But Brooking suffering quite a lot here. He's tried once or twice today, but Eric's not really the climber he was a few years ago when he was regarded as a possible winner of the Tour de France.
A little surprise there, though, with the TDF rider in second place. Bo Hamburger had a stage win a couple of Sundays ago in the race. That was his first victory. He's riding high too for a good finish in Paris in his second Tour de France, and this breakaway would be doing the world of good to climb up into the top 20 overall. But it looks, Paul, as though in fact the acceleration that keeps on coming from the yellow jersey bunch is going to bring these three back to the fold, which will leave just Carretou, Eric Carretou, the Chazelle team. He's out on his own. And then we have the three leaders who are still going clear, and it's all because of the efforts of that one man, Piotr Ugrimov.
And surprisingly enough, in the front there, Barney Ries is almost unable to help his teammate Ugrimov, who's an excellent climber in his own right, to contribute to the success of that breakaway. And the little Nelson Rodriguez, to me, could be a danger man, because Rodriguez actually finished second on a very good mountain stage of the Tour of Italy this year, where they finished inside France at Les Deux Alpes. So Nelson Rodriguez is a man to watch for the finish when we get up here to the top in Val Thorens.
So for the second time today, Eric Brooking can take a look over his shoulder and see the yellow jersey of Miguel Indurain clawing him back in. I'm not too sure they're aware of the proximity of Miguel on the field there, but they're coming up on these three pretty rapidly, and certainly now the champion of Colombia is Frederic Munoz has taken a quick glance over his right shoulder, and he's going to see them coming through like an express train.
Pulnikov actually coming again to the front to do an awful lot of work in there. Maybe that the animosity between himself and Marco Pantani has disappeared, and they've decided to work together, realizing that as two riders together working in unison, they can actually work something out, because Pantani seems to have recovered quite well from that crash he had earlier in the day, when I really believed one moment he was going to abandon, because he looked in a very bad state for 4 or 5 kilometers there on the Col.
And the Chazelle team car stopped on the left of the road there, and that could lead to the fact that we might well be now picking up also Eric Carretou. And here are the three leaders, with Rodriguez's team manager shouting at him there, giving him some advice. He sat at the back the whole ride so far, so he certainly should have the strength to jump away later on and maybe win the stage.
Going up the side of Val Thorens. Back to the racing in a moment, but a reminder that tonight at 7:30 Eastern on ESPN's Win.
Who's worked with his teammates, finally was shed by his teammate Peter Ugrimov attacking, and instead of getting rid of Nelson Rodriguez, he got rid of his own man, Bjorn Ries. Ries has been dispatched back to a group of about 15 riders being led by Pascal Lino and Miguel Indurain. He's almost caught by them now, and the gap of these two men over that Indurain group has come down as well to 3 minutes and 20 seconds. These two have attacked and counter-attacked one another on this climb, and so far they've matched each other wheel for wheel.
Well, they have. It started off with Ugrimov dropping back a little bit to try and surprise Nelson Rodriguez. Rodriguez suffered, but he did manage to fight back, and ever since then the two of them have been working a little bit together, realizing that if they try that game, attacking each other all the time, then the main field may well come back. And you can see there isn't much chase here at the moment now, which is a bit of a shame for Marco Pantani, who I thought had a great chance of taking the stage today, but that crash early on in the day must have really slowed him down a bit.
A select group of 17 riders. Another man of note who's now been dropped by them is Vladimir Pulnikov. He made a lot of running, we thought, to try and close the gap down and launch Pantani, his teammate, onto the attack again. But in fact, once he went to the back of this group, he tailed off, and so Pulnikov has gone. And the latest news on Armand de las Cuevas is that he's lost now around 7 to 8 minutes, and in fact the race radio has stopped talking about him. So it does sound, Paul, as though he's going to lose a lot of time today.
Most certainly, especially on a climb like this, as we go with the leaders now under 10 kilometers to go for these two leaders. Not very far now, and you can see everybody starting to move up to the front a little bit, and always Miguel Indurain in second or third position. The man has never been put under pressure at all today. There was at one time over the top of that last col when Richard Virenque was going to go for the King of the Mountains, and Indurain just accelerated a little bit to show him just how strong he was.
Well, the chase group being led here by Gianluca Bortolami, teammate of Tony Rominger, now out of the Tour, and himself a stage winner here, Bortolami, about 10 days ago. Then comes Indurain, Alex Zula in the pink on the far side, Roberto Conti. And in this group too, we have Udo Boltz, the German, who continues to ride with the best climbers in this year's Tour, and is having an excellent race indeed.
In fact, it's quite strange here to see this group of 15 riders, and for once in this year's Tour de France, Miguel Indurain does not have one teammate present in the group to help him at all if he has problems in the final, and that could be dangerous, because if he was to have a puncture, then it would be very difficult for him to get back into contention. There's the little drop now as we leave Le Menuire, and then the riders will then tilt back upwards and climb to Val Thorens and go over the 2,000-meter mark.
Nice little twisty descent, a chance for some deep breathing before the riders make their final climb of the day. But this road has been steadily uphill now for more than 20 miles. And there's the latest news, 3 minutes 15 seconds. So they're nibbling into the lead of these two, Paul. But you know, I think they have left it too late. Indurain has not countered any of the moves. He's just ridden in number 2 position and allowed other teammates to make the pace.
Definitely, as we get a chance to look back here, there is Marco Pantani, and up until now he's been very much marked by Richard Virenque, and I didn't see exactly where Richard Virenque was sitting in that main field until now, but the two of them, there he is just a little bit further up the group. He's been very closely attentive of the position of Marco Pantani, because he regards this man as a threat to his King of the Mountains jersey. But I think the fact that Pantani was so far behind when we went over the Col Du Glandon and then the Col Du Madeleine, that Richard Virenque doesn't have a great deal to worry about in that instance.
Pascal Lino done a fine session of pacemaking. Again, they've got all the riders up here to consolidate their lead overall in the team race, Festina, and that is an excellent result for that team.
Phil, Festina is the only one of 21 original teams to still have their full complement of their original roster. Heavy toll on these mountain roads. We are headed toward the finish on the top of Val Thorens. 1 mile. That's what's left for the leaders in stage 17, pumping their way up the cloud-covered summit of Val Thorens. On paper, Nelson Rodriguez should have the advantage behind Ugrimov at the finish. That's on paper. We're on a mountain. Back to Phil and Paul.
2 of the 3 men that went over the top of the Col Du Madeleine have survived, and in fact the rider in the front here, Peter Ugrimov, he launched a tremendous attack at the start of this climb, and he shed his teammate Bjorn Ries, and he was hoping he would have shed the little limpet at the back here, Nelson Rodriguez. He's followed Ugrimov everywhere he's gone, and in fact has attacked him once or twice, but Ugrimov has answered those attacks. The field generally behind, regrouped, but they've split up again. We've now a very select group of some 15 men, including, of course, Miguel Indurain in the yellow jersey. And the last time check we got was just inside 3 minutes and 20 seconds. So it looks as though this breakaway, which was a gamble, is going to pay off for one of these two riders. De Las Cuevas, by the way, that struggled over the top of the mountain some 5 minutes back, is a lot further back than that now, although we don't have an accurate fix on him. We think we're talking of around about 10 minutes. So De Las Cuevas is dropping out of the top 6 riders overall in the Tour tonight. There's the chase group, just gone clear of them. Rolf Sørensen of Denmark, and they've swept up Bjorn Ries, who's passed through the bunch here. And now on the far side of the road, we've waited for the attack, and it looks as though Pantani is going to launch the attack at around about 5 kilometres to go. And Pantani goes now again, Paul. This is the 5th time he's done this. Surely he can't bridge 3 minutes.
Well, he may well not be able to, but I think you've got to take your hat off to this man because he's had a terrible day today. He had that crash very early on the Col Du Glandon, and in fact I was quite convinced he may well abandon it. It took him a long time to get going, and he has tried. Luc Leblanc has decided, no, I don't think I can stay with him. I'll stay with the security of the yellow jersey group because I think this man is going to blow me away. And he really has got a fantastic attack as soon as it goes uphill.
So smooth, he is a pure climber. It's a pity he's never had a real shot at the stage win at all, except the very first time he went onto the mountains in the Pyrenees at Hautacam, where he did go and was the leader on the road, and he fell short by a couple of kilometres when he blew and hit the wall, and Miguel Indurain, in a very powerful force that day, went by him. But now he's going again, and our caption says Luc Leblanc, but in fact this, believe me, as we all know, the man in white is Marco Pantani. And now he's off in pursuit just ahead of him, and not very far ahead of him, and I think we can see him. Yes, we can. That's Rolf Sørensen, who attacked about a kilometre further down the mountain, and now we'll see the difference. This is the situation of 4 kilometres, and the two riders continuing to plod happily on, but Paul, now there's exactly a kilometre between them. Can they do it?
Well, I tell you one thing, if there's one man in this whole race can bridge the gap to those two leaders, this is the man we're looking at now, number 56, Marco Pantani. He's got the speed, he's had a tough day, and I think he'll try and offer this stage to Claudio Chiappucci because he would so dearly love to have Claudio Chiappucci here with him today, and that's not possible. Chiappucci left the race in the Pyrenees, and Pantani has jumped clear of the main field, and he's really got the hammer down now.
Well, now we see the reaction of Indurain, and there isn't really a great deal of reaction at all. He continues to drive the group along. Pantani has picked up Rolf Sørensen, and now look at that, he just accelerates straight through Sørensen, a stage winner this year on the Tour for the first time, as under the banner goes the yellow jersey. And what's the gap, Paul?
Well, I'm waiting for the Pantani to come up to the 4 kilometre banner here because it's more important for me to see just how far behind he is at the 4 kilometre mark on the two leaders, and he's flying away from them now at the moment.
Marco Pantani flying away, certainly the biggest story today. See what else has happened so far in Stage 17 with the Michelin race summary. 31 miles into the race, 3 men, including Piotr Ugrimov, Bjarne Ries, and Nelson Rodriguez, broke away in hopes of winning a stage. Ries, however, couldn't keep up and was dropped. The real story, as we say, continues to be Marco Pantani. After crashing early, he came back with a lot of help from Carrera and left Miguel Indurain behind on the mountains for the 2nd straight day.
3 kilometres to go for the two leaders, and let's hope that Marco Pantani can get back into contention. He really is flying along. Now, the big problem for the two leaders is they're going to start watching each other because Piotr Ugrimov has tried once or twice to get clear from those two riders. And looking at his chainring here, most of the other riders in this race are on this small chainring, and he's going up here on the big chainring.
Unbelievable. I think, you know, the crash has released so much adrenaline now that he is a man very, very determined to at last get a stage win. He's trying to bridge what we thought was an impossible gap at this stage of the race. He's flying across it at the moment. There's the climb that they face. Oh dear, our cameraman's got a little bit dizzy there, but we come right round the valley and back onto the front of the chase group here of Miguel Indurain. I don't think they'll be making contact with any of the 3 or 4 riders up the road now. Sørensen is up there too somewhere. He'll be 4th. This is Pantani, and 35 seconds his lead now over the Maillot Jaune and Miguel Indurain. But of course, we're more interested to see him pass under that 3 kilometre banner to get a fix on him on the 2 riders up front.
Well, all the work now is being left up to Miguel Indurain. He doesn't have any teammates left in this group. He has to set the tempo. He realizes that the tempo he can set is uncomfortable enough to prevent any more attacks. He's not too worried, I don't think, about Marco Pantani at the moment. He'll be looking to see what the situation is behind 2 minutes and 21 seconds. So it's coming down pretty rapidly for Marco Pantani. He really has got to give it everything he's got over the last couple of kilometers. But, you know, I think once again he's left it a little bit too late to try and get across to get the stage victory.
Well, he's taken a minute in just over a kilometre. It's asking a lot to expect him to take more than that in the remaining two. But, of course, as Paul Sherwin has said, if they start the cat-and-mouse tactics, because they're both equal in strength, these two riders at the front, and they'll be worried about one another, and they don't know how to get rid of one another either. So it might well be that they will slow down. I'm sorry about these pictures breaking up as we climb up to the highest point in the Tour de France this year, here at Val Thorens, but it is very difficult weather conditions, and I can tell you it's also extremely cold.
2 kilometers to go now for Ugrimov and Rodriguez. We're also keeping an eye on Pantani's comeback. More in a moment.
Down all of the time, these two. Nelson Rodriguez now totally refuses to go in front of Ugrimov. He does not want to be surprised by a sprint from the Latvian rider from behind. Rodriguez offered no assistance at all for the majority of this breakaway. He's always wanted to play the man at the back of the group because he knows that Ugrimov is racing for a high finish overall in the Tour de France. There is the kite, 1 kilometre to go. And so there is still a chance here that Pantani will actually move up to 3rd place overall, but I think there's now very good reason for doubt he won't pick up these two. We'll see how they react. The only thing in the favour of Pantani is it climbs all the way to the finishing line. There's no respite, and so if they do slow down, they will slow down rather dramatically. There's the miss which is causing the problems with our pictures to you today as we come now to the highest point of this year's Tour de France, and it is extremely cold up here today. I would say that temperatures have now gone to around about 47 degrees Fahrenheit.
It looks to me now as if Ugrimov is starting to have 1 or 2 problems, because 3 or 4 times he's actually tried to tighten up his shoes, and very often the shoes have a Velcro fastener. The shoes that he's wearing, the brand, actually have a key to turn on the top there, and he's tightened them once or twice, and it may well be he's got a little problem there. Nelson Rodriguez, on the other hand, doesn't look quite so bad, and it's going to be a very close sprint between these two riders. The Colombian is an excellent finisher, but it's always difficult when you come to the top of a mountain to try and sort out the sprint when it's in the final few hundred meters.
Well, conditions have become so bad we can't even pick you up a picture from about 600 meters away now. We're going to have to go to our fixed finish cameras here and see the sprint started. Colombia have yet to win a stage of the Tour de France. They've come close, they've had 2nd places, but now they're looking for the victory here from the smallest man in the race, Nelson Rodriguez. As the crowd start to applaud, I should imagine the sprint has also started, and the man in blue is Peter Ugrimov, and he's got the lead as he has had virtually throughout this breakaway. He's now trying to force the Colombian to open the attacking on his left shoulder. It's going to be a close sprint indeed, though, as they go briefly into this tunnel at 400 meters from the line. Now, we may lose pictures in the tunnel here. In fact, we've got a fixed camera in the tunnel, so we're going to see them right through the tunnel as we come out of it at 400 meters to go now. And I think Ugrimov is going to more or less give this to the little Colombian, because he's going to lead him out too easily. And we would expect the Colombian climber to have something of a reasonable finish. Certainly Ugrimov is not a great sprinter, but he's trying desperately to force the Colombian to do something about it, but this little man is not going to be outmaneuvered at this stage. He must have more strength left than Ugrimov, because he sat at the back for virtually the whole of the day. Ugrimov starts, he'll probably weave him across towards the barriers and pretend he doesn't know he's there if he can squeeze something out of him, but in fact Nelson Rodriguez now is starting to fire well and comes through quite clearly the winner, as the man who's done all of the work and slams his handlebars, Ugrimov, gives way to Rodriguez of Colombia on the line. And there is the rider now speeding up. Look how close he got, Paul, because he's now into the tunnel. And so he closed dramatically over those last 2 kilometres.
Well, he's closed to more than 3 minutes on these 2 leaders. In fact, he's going to be less than 45 seconds behind at the top. What a shame. I really wish that this man could have won the stage today. I had him down as one of my favourites. He's done an incredible ride over the last 4 or 5 kilometres and bridged an enormous gap. Just a couple more kilometres, and this is the man who would have taken the stage victory today after such a terrible day for him when he crashed and was so close to abandoning. You can still see the scar on his knee there as he comes up to the last couple of 100 meters.
So robbed again, and this is the 5th time in the mountains he's made a late run for gold, and he's been robbed again. And don't forget, today he crashed very early on the Col Du Glandon, and he must at some stage have contemplated retiring from the Tour de France. He recovered because the race went so slowly until they crossed the Col Du Madeleine. And my goodness me, he showed them he was well back on form when he came up here to the finish of Val Thorens. 1 minute and 7 seconds behind on the line. Tremendous climb by Pantani.
Bill, just 2 days ago, Marco Pantani was 27th overall. Today, he's in the top 5, just where we won't know until Miguel Indurain comes across. That'll happen in just a moment. Indurain behind on the Tour's toughest mountains. The yellow jersey is headed toward the finish line, along with the Frenchmen, who are also challengers to Indurain. Get back on the course now with Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwin.
Luc Leblanc here is the rider who's jumped clear from the yellow jersey group, trying to save a little bit of time on himself, and obviously Marco Pantani, who stands a good chance of leaping over him in the overall standings today. Leblanc's had an awful time today. He's been dropped on 2 or 3 occasions.
Well, in fact, if the clock gets up to 2:12 before Luc Leblanc crosses the line here, then he will lose his 3rd place to Pantani, but he won't, because this is Leblanc leading them out. He knows how important it is to actually get up and finish here in 4th place. So 2:12 is the time, which will cost Leblanc his 3rd place overall to Marco Pantani, and it's going to be very, very close indeed. And that's why Leblanc is having to lead out here, and he sat up.
In fact, I think it's cracked, Phil. He really tried to get across there, and he got into the tunnel and realised he'd gone too far out, and he lost all the weight.
So he's lost 3rd place at the moment in the Tour de France. Marco Pantani up to 5th yesterday, up to 3rd today, despite the crash. And it's left to Miguel Indurain now to take 4th place. And in fact, Luc Leblanc is hanging on to the tail of his teammate Richard Virenque, who will be the next man in the sight of Marco Pantani, perhaps tomorrow, as Virenque takes on Indurain, gets his revenge from the top of the Col Du Madeleine and beats Indurain to the line for 4th place.
Nelson Rodriguez, in 5 hours, 13 minutes and 52 seconds, covered the 90 miles. Interestingly, in the last 50 yards, he edged out Piotr Ugramov. Miguel Indurain, back in 5th place, 2 minutes and 37 seconds behind. The Italian Marco Pantani, the fallen hero, not quite. He fell, yes, but got back in the saddle again and turned in one of the most courageous efforts of the Tour. All right, the overall standings. In the last 2 days, Pantani has made up 4 minutes against Indurain. With 3 days left in the mountains, if he keeps up that average, he'll be within 2 minutes of Miguel as we come out of the Alps and head toward Paris. At this point in the Tour de France, every stage is a tough one. It doesn't get any easier for Indurain, Virenque, Leblanc, and of course Pantani. Phil Liggett puts his efforts in perspective.
Well, Marco Pantani is becoming a real star of this year's Tour de France, and he's making his own headlines. He falls off today, and for a long time he looked to me as though he was going to retire. And then he got back on his bike and he struggled back into the main field. He was very lucky that the main field kept that slow pace up for so long. And then when he got to the pack, he found that 3 men had left it. He chased so hard to catch the 2 survivors. And over those last few kilometres, he ate into the lead, but it wasn't good enough. At least now, though, he's in a position to stand on the podium in Paris, and let's hope he keeps that.
Well, Phil, standing on the podium at Val Thorens, Miguel Indurain for the 10th straight day as the leader of the 94 Tour. 81st edition of the Tour de France has now traveled 2,094 miles with 376 to go. Tomorrow, stage 18 leaves from Moutier and travels 105 miles to Cluse. Start to finish coverage is on the air at 3 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. on ESPN2. And then stage 19, the day that follows, a time trial in the mountains. It goes a long way to deciding who will be the favorite going to Paris. For Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwin, I'm Adrian Karsten. We'll see you tomorrow. Host of the 1992 Winter Olympics, but the Tour de France is a game like